Chapter 2. What did it mean to be in love with the world? I could not tell a soul, for it had been long for me, too long. Not that the passion was dead in me. It was alive and well, and screamed at me each day from the first sign of sunlight until I closed my eyes to sleep. This place was more than I thought, but the isolation made it impossible to share things with anyone else. It was my birthday, and once again I spent it alone. 3 years is too long to be alone on earth, even with Carmela at my side. I first saw her after the blast, the one that took the others. Even while the ground shook, Carmela sat looking at me as she did now. It was as if she instinctively knew what it did to them, as if she knew there would be no others but me from then on out. Without a blink or so much as a shiver, she sat frozen on that rock, looking at me with those heavy-lidded eyes. That day I cried for hours, longer than I cared to recall. Carmela did not know of self-pity. Pity does not help a creature who's struggling alone to survive in the wild. She was a different breed, but we were friends. 2 females living together as silent partners, Carmela and I, lizard and gardener. We relied on each other. I liked to think she had the nature of truly caring for me, aside from the insects I fed her. Garden crickets were her favorite, and in ample supply on the hillside. Not those little green ones, mind you, but the big black ones that squirmed in her mouth and crackled as she swallowed them whole. They were too big for her, but nonetheless she gobbled them up, even while they caused her to choke. The lizard would never learn not to bite off more than she could chew. But who would blame her? Perhaps crickets were her chocolate. It had been so long since my taste of chocolate. Something as diminutive as a little choking would not have prevented me from inhaling a chunk of the sweet brown heaven, if one were available in this place. I'd have devoured it. So there I was, waiting with Carmela, each Tuesday the same routine. Even in oblivion, consistency ruled the planet. Taryn told us it would be like this. He said the waiting would be grueling, though he himself had never and could never swim in the light. He was too old. But he was right. The waiting was hard, and you could not train for that. I prepared myself for 3 months before my swim, isolated myself whenever possible from the rest of the group. I stayed in my room, ate alone, camped for 3 weeks straight in the wooded side of the lab's property. I did it right, just as Taryn trained me to. I thought I was ready when the time came to take the step. I thought I was. I'd been wrong. No one could ever be prepared enough for the waiting, because I was never sure what I waited for would come. Another day, another glorious day, but without human companionship. I looked to creatures for comfort. Though they could be wondrous, there was so much to be missed by the human glance, the words, the smile, the touch. Yet this was why I did it, wasn't it? All of us in Teapot were spirits who loved the world and humanity. Carmela blinked, scampered toward me, and ran onto my hand and up my arm, finally resting on my shoulder. I rubbed the top of her head. When the coddling stopped, she leaned in for more. It was Tuesday afternoon, and the sun beamed hot. Would one come today? No one came. They never did. 187 Tuesdays, and still no one came. I plucked her from my shoulder, carried her back down the knoll into the hill house, and set her upon the floor. She scratched at the hard dirt wall to sharpen her claws as I finished preparing dinner. I was good at dinners. The floral bouquet I gathered of spring dandelions and violets would prove tasty as a side salad this eve. The rabbit stew had cooked all day, and the meat was so soft it had fallen apart into thin strips in the clay pot. The only way I liked my rabbit was tender and stringy. The smell couldn't help but force me to remember my first hunting experience in this new land. Even though the little hoppers were abundant, it still took me 2 days to catch one, once I finally set it in my head to. After practice, I could snare a rabbit in 15 minutes. Still, I preferred chicken meat to rabbit. Chickens were easier to catch, but rarely seen. They hid, so squirrels were what I ate most. The one thing I disliked about making squirrel was those tiny bones. Trying to get the meat off them if you cooked it whole was like shelling crab for its precious meat at the eating room back home. The best thing about squirrel was that they weren't scarce and tasted better than rabbit. Even at that, they evaded me this morning, so it was rabbit I found myself eating tonight. I removed the floral from the counter and began plucking the pieces from the stalks. I used only the leaves from the dandelions and the petals of the violets, then threw the scraps out the door for the rabbits to pick at. Slipping the new wooden plate from the old one beneath, I uncovered the other herbs and checked them for moistness. The parsley and basil were damp enough to enjoy fully. Putting a few large pieces of each into the salad, I reached for the hanging leather bag near the window and added several drops of apple vinegar. Carmela was on the table waiting for me. I threw her a strip of rabbit meat, which she engulfed in a quick moment, and then I sat down to eat. Once again I wondered who they would be sending and when he would get here. My mind was patient, but my heart grew anxious. Had Taryn really told me it would be a year or two? Or had it been so long I'd forgotten? Living alone, I suppose I'd forgotten some things about humanity, but in all certainty they had said a year or two. Either they were mistaken, or he was late. I hoped I would remember social skills when he got here. Worried about communication, I'd kept up with my languages by speaking to Carmela in each of them throughout my day. I wondered which language he would speak. Which pod would he come from, teapot, crewpod, or one of the others? I did my part. Where was he? It crossed my mind that Father couldn't fix the machine, but of course he would fix it. Aside from being head of the science division, he was a seer too, after all. He would view the pool and know I was here alone. He would never tolerate that. Perhaps the earth had already died. What if no one ever came? I was so tired of being alone. I was special, Taryn had said. Special. My genes were perfect for travel. I had a photographic memory, and my IQ was among the highest in the pods. From a group of 1,000 I was picked to be the first through, the healthiest child of the teapot community, genetically the strongest. My chance of surviving travel was the greatest, they'd said. Ironic as it was, for all the studying and training, the swim turned out to be simple for me. It was nothing more than stepping through the wet puddle, feeling a blast of bright light burning at my closed eyes, then a moment of walking in a dream. Finally, there'd been a feeling as if a hard smack to the back from a wide board, and then it was done. I rolled into the grasses, and here I was on this hillside. The others did not survive. Before we swam, Taryn said another would be sent through a year or two later. A male, for physical strength. He'd said, "Wait and do not wander from the place." Carmela climbed up to the edge of the shallow bowl and helped herself to more rabbit string. I picked up a violet petal and let it melt on my tongue. 16 now. Happy birthday, I said.